When South Africans went to the polls, in East Africa, a country, Rwanda, was going through challenging times. We know that there was an attempt to reach out to African countries to intervene, and we know that at some point in time, the African National Congress, the governing party, was consulted. But because of elections in South Africa at that time, elections that were also characterized with some violence in some parts of the country, not much was done to assist Rwanda to avoid that tragedy. 30 years on, both countries are looking back. 1994, what transpired, and we are going to be in conversation with President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who will share with us his thoughts in terms of what transpired on that day, where Rwanda is, the current issues in the region, global issues, and also the relationship between South Africa and Rwanda. Mr. President, thank you for your time and for agreeing to speak to SABC.
You're welcome.
Let's look back at 1994. What happened that today we're talking about this terrible, terrible history?
Well, in 1994, everything and anything that could go wrong went wrong, happened. But that was also following 30 years or so of turbulent history and politics of our country. So in 1994, the tragedy that happened wasn't just one of its kind and one of that. It was just because when we look back, 1960s, around the time our country got independence. We got independence in 1962. But 2 years before, 2 years after 1962, there was political turbulence that was more or less to lay foundation of troubles going another 30 years. Because around that time, let's say 1961, I was 4 years old. And around that time is when my family went into exile. And many other people's families went into exile in the neighboring countries, mainly Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, Zaire then, or whatever it was called that time, maybe Congo. Then, and beyond. So this in itself tells the starting of the story of what we saw in 1994. So people would want to portray 94 tragedy as something that was sparked by this or by that, and as if it was just confined to that period. But I'm just telling you, and with the facts and evidence, that 30 years before that, I was a kid and a refugee with all my parents and siblings and other people's families and everybody. And there is a reason why those of us particularly were refugees. It was targeted, a group targeted, even as early as that. And owing also to the history of the colonial history, the discrimination, the divide and rule that was used. It wasn't just in Rwanda. Some of these practices were also elsewhere, but I'm just talking about the story of Rwanda now, the one we are concerned with at this moment. So that's what happened, meaning 1994 was more or less a replay to the extreme of what had happened beginning of 60s.
Mr. President, couldn't people of Rwanda at that time find a way to avoid such a tragedy? Irrespective of which side, there was no room for stopping this tragedy, including the international community. Why?
Well, there was room, but people didn't act the way they should have. In fact, there was room in as far as also there were in 1994, there were negotiations going on in Tanzania, in Arusha, where I don't need to go into, that would be a diversion, talk about the war, the details. Let me first talk about this, about the question you've raised of whether there was room, there was time for people to sit and resolve whatever outstanding issues. There was, I think, and I believe, because we were having negotiations in Arusha that started early 90s, immediately after the war. But simply there was, people were bent on, this is why I started telling you the exact background, the story, beginning with the early 60s. I think what we saw play out in 1994 is what I termed as the extreme of what had started in 1960. So even as we were discussing in Arusha to find a peaceful resolution, meaning to have, to end the discrimination that was happening in the country, to end the refugee problem that was going on for these last 30 years by 1994. But one of the parties, the main party that we were talking to, was still living in the early 60s. That's why they couldn't, in fact, we were almost making a breakthrough as by 1993 with these negotiations that were happening in Tanzania. And then I remember in February 1993, the same government we were talking to and laying out all these issues that have led to what happened and so on and so forth. There is a place here in the country called Chibirira. They went and massacred people. The same people that had been discriminated, and I was referring to starting with the early 60s. In the middle of the discussions, it was really almost sticking it into our face and saying, well, we are here wasting time. For us, we'll go on with what we've been doing and known to do for quite some time. In fact, around that, there are particular names, by the way, known all over and documented even by the UN and so on. There was a man who was at the center of this tragic history of ours, the genocide, a man called Wagosora. He used to work for the government of Habyarimana. Those killings actually ended the discussions in Arusha, because we needed to understand what was going on. Why would we be discussing, and have been doing so for some time, and then the party of government that we are talking to just starts killing people again? So when the talks broke down in February '93, this man, they were not even afraid of saying it publicly. He made a statement. It is in the books, you can check, and people know this, that he's now going to prepare an apocalypse. That is the word he actually used, apocalypse, which was referring to the genocide anyway that happened a year later. So this is documented. It was in the open. It is not anything one has to guess about. So, to answer your question, it was possible, and that's what we were doing in Arusha. And of course, the international community was also involved in this. It was the parties, the Rwandan parties. It was Tanzania that was helping, to host this discussion. It was the whole world involved in Arusha to resolve this problem. But it didn't stop those killings. It didn't stop somebody threatening to do what he would do, and later on what happened. So this is the way it is.
Now, Mr. President, the country has embarked on a process in terms of reconciliation. That's exactly what South Africa attempted to do or did. But the question is, has this process yielded the much needed results to unite Rwanda and all who live in Rwanda, irrespective of what transpired in 1994?
I would say with the confidence that absolutely that has given us the kinds of results, meaning the reconciliation process that we expected. But nothing, you always see that there is nothing perfect. But you can only rejoice in the significance and how far you've gone into achieving what you wanted to achieve. What I mean is that the differences and the agony, the quest for justice, and in this situation, and is not something you can erase just in one generation. Some things keep, they linger on, but you have to create that space, and the feeling that to a great extent is what dominates, that people can live their lives again in harmony and make progress together and so on. So that's what is happening. And you are here, you should feel free to go to any part of the country and ask anybody you wish to. You can, maybe they can say it better to you than I am. Well, the viewers will say, yeah, what else would he say? Meaning to my answer. But if you went privately on your own and go anywhere in the country, ask anybody you wish to, who will be available. They will tell you a story that will convince you, and maybe that will convince the viewers or many others. But the stability this country has, the decent progress we are making in socio-economic areas, cannot be happening on the basis of what would be going wrong here. There is no perfect country. We are not claiming to be perfect at all. We have a lot of problems to address. We have maybe many flaws in our systems, but these are things we have to deal with in life and in our country, and as we are aware, each country has its own flaws and problems to deal with. But I'm very confident that we have made huge, in fact, even surprisingly, to a level that I probably would not have expected. I would, when I look back, I think to an extent it's not just the right things we have done. There is a bit of luck. There is with so little that the country has, and the magnitude of the problem itself, as to us at the beginning, I expected that we would be lagging behind where we are today. But there is progress to talk about. There is progress to continue building on, because we need to keep going forward. So that's where we are.
Mr. President, when we look at those who left the country after that tragedy, who are aggrieved, and some are in different other countries, who are your critics saying that you don't allow dissent and you don't allow others to also contribute to building a better Rwanda? We know some are in Congo, others are in France, others even in South Africa. And that's their view. What would you say to people who are not familiar with this issue, who hear those voices of people saying we want to go home, but we can't go home because of the leader?
For sure. Well, let me put it clearly this way. In 1994 up to 1996 maybe, we had almost half of the population then, half of the population, millions, internally displaced or as refugees in the neighboring countries. Talk of Congo, DRC, then Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi. We had millions, half our population at that time. Now, 99% of these returned and were resettled. They are now the people, among others, who are making this progress happen. That's it. And this, by the way, included their leaders then, during the genocide, and most of whom were even tried in the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in Arusha again, and others escaped and went to different countries, even stayed in our region, neighboring countries. Some of them were never reached, and you know, this tribunal has closed down. There are residual things they have to deal with. I'm sure recently you learned that there are even cases they discovered in South Africa.
Yes, in Cape Town.
Yes, there are many others of that kind.
That's the people that I'm talking about who are aggrieved, who are saying you don't want them back.
First of all, I don't see. I mean, actually, the people here are aggrieved. These people got involved in a genocide and are free, whether it is in the neighboring countries or in South Africa or in Europe or United States. These are people documented, not by me, not by Rwanda, even by the International Criminal Tribunal. But we have these files here, so for everybody to see. In fact, I will give you another example. We have cases going on in, say, United Kingdom. For the last 15 years, people who got involved in the genocide, the case files are clear. And we were asking United Kingdom and say, why don't you try these people or give them to us for trial? Because they got involved and these are the facts. Now, first, UK told us, the agencies concerned, they said, no, in Rwanda you don't have a justice system that works well or that would be fair and so on and so forth. So we can't give them back to you. And we told them a simple thing. We told, okay, don't give them to us. You try them since you have a good system. This is the fact. This is the evidence of the crimes they committed. And we've been going back and forth for the last 15 years. And recently is when they said, yeah, we are going to try them. So I think over time, they just saw the foolishness of this argument. You can't give them to us, but you are not even saying, no, they did not commit any crime. But you are saying we can't give them to Rwanda because Rwanda's weakness is here, there, or something that is not working. Okay, fine. And this is what we turned against them and said, okay, since your system has so many years of stability and your capacity and so on and so forth, why don't you try them? Or why didn't you give them to the tribunal? Otherwise, that act looked like protecting them. And you're protecting people you know with evidence that has been shown to you that are actually guilty of or are implicated in this claim. So the only thing we wanted to do is confirm whether they are guilty of this or not. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you avoid it if you are really what you should be or what you claim? Now, among them, therefore, you can see this, that I told you of a case in South Africa, I told you a case in the UK, there are cases in France, there are cases in Belgium, there are cases in Germany, in the US, but a small fraction of these cases, some of these countries have actually brought some of these people back. There is, again, a funny case, like in the United States, there are 2 cases. There are more than 2, but there are 2 cases where we kept also showing the departments responsible the evidence against these people that they got involved in the genocide. And they were also adamant. They were not trying them, they were not handing them over back to us for trial or even giving them to. Then, these 2 people, for 2 cases, the people involved, in different states of the United States, they committed crimes. New crimes now in the United States. And then after a few weeks and months, we saw them asking us, we can now send these people back. So they are sending these people back to us because they have committed crimes on top of what they committed here in the United States. Some of them have been repatriated on that basis. But you look at how many years that have passed. But there are, to be fair, there are other countries, in fact, particularly, well, it has been two opposite things. In some cases, they have brought them and we have tried them here. Like Germany handed over a couple of cases of, there is a certain name well known in the genocide that went and escaped and went and took refuge in Germany, and were asking them why they don't try these people, or why don't they. Over time, they actually handed over this case because they think over time they established the truth about what we were telling them. They brought the case here. The same thing in a number of cases have happened with the Netherlands. Even one or two cases, but there are more cases in France. But a number of cases also handed back. So it is full of this confusion. I can understand what confuses people out there, but then let's talk about this. Two cases for critics, let me differentiate them. Actually, there are two types. There is this kind of people who actually got involved in the genocide or accused of this. It was never proven which side they were, but because of this blockage of justice. So they have now changed from being alleged perpetrators of genocide to being now political activists, people with who should have rights in exercising their politics and so on and so forth. So you have these two things in one. You have somebody who actually left here suspected to have participated in genocide, and then over time, because of this, and I think the mismanagement to an extent in some places is deliberate. There has been, this force, invisible force around that really wants to play down genocide, and it's as if, who cares? I remember there is someone at the UN during the time genocide was happening here at the start, and everybody was saying, what do we call it? Is it a genocide or no? There are acts of genocide. Another one asking, but how many acts of genocide do you need to have before you call it a genocide? And there was debate. One person at the UN said, when they asked this person what is happening in Rwanda and why there is no acting and to stop it and so on. Really, somebody sort of dismissed it and was like saying, it's Hutus are killing Tutsis, Tutsis are killing Hutus. So it's like these primitive Africans are just used to killing each other. So they really put it in that form. It's like this is savage. Yes. Africans are just used to killing each other. So there is an element of that. It's like justice or lack of it is okay as long as it is an African case. There's an element of that, and maybe which is really adds to being racist. So. But that's one category of these people who actually got involved in genocide and who now turn political, and it's like there is activism, they have the right to be, and the world takes it up and hypes it, and it's like deleting the case, rubbing it off in the files of genocide against these people, and then turning them into politics, the opposition who are, being persecuted and being hunted down by everyone. So that's one case. The other, you may have nothing to do with the genocide accusations or anything. And by the way, we have those also living in South Africa. There are people who were here originally, like the former Army Chief of Staff who lives in South Africa for many years now and has become this activist who even coordinates those who were or works with those who committed genocide and others who. So there are people who left this country. We are not part of the genocide accusation or anything. But they had their own other problems. Problems, one, they created themselves. Some of them were just, what should I say, that's a bit polite. They actually committed offenses. Some of them stole public finances, and others did different things that they would be held accountable for here ordinarily, like we hold each other accountable in the country. But for them, because of this history and the way people manage to maneuver through these cases, they would always find it easy to run to any of these countries and claim or seek refugee status and claim they were being persecuted by a bad government, because this one can't say they are telling lies that I'm a genocide perpetrator or this. No, because that one would not be in that category. They would now say it's a dictatorship in Rwanda, is bad. I said this and somebody was not happy and they started running after me, when it is somebody who openly stole public finances.
But Mr. President, the allegations or that statement and their point of view, some people do believe that.
I know.
And people are saying perhaps it has got to do with your leadership style, that you are intolerant of opposition. What is your reaction to the criticism that you don't want opposition?
Okay, opposition is a very vague thing when you say the opposition. But I want you to get me clearly, or even the one who's listening. I'm not apologetic to being intolerant to people who participated in the genocide or that would want to do that. That one I'm not apologetic. Using whatever possibility I have, I'll come down heavily on you. There's no question about it. I'm not apologetic about holding accountable thieves, people who steal public finances. I'm not apologetic. But when I'm saying that, I'm not the one really who goes after them. No, I demand that the systems that are responsible for that actually do it. Whether it is the Minister of Justice, the prosecutors, or it's in fact the platform on which our systems are founded, and that is demanding accountability, because it is part of national healing. It's about part of good politics, as I understand it. If there's anybody who understands it differently, that's fine. We can have a debate about that. So there are these two things I'm not apologetic about, especially holding and being in a position of responsibility, holding an office, and then you think you'll be there and do anything you want or you like, whether it is legal or illegal. Coming after you as a system is something I want to see happen. It's something I encourage. It's something I would not apologize for. In the same vein, if there is anybody against whom injustice is being done, I will also make sure that this person gets justice. In other words, I also turn my attention, my focus, onto those who are doing injustice to people, and the question, and the courts of law will deal with that. Now, whether in politics, but that's not the politics I understand and I would want to practice, but if in some minds there is a politics that says, but you can't keep going hard on everybody, you know, when they are involved in corruption. You see, you know, the level of our development, some people, their families are hungry. I understand, all of us are suffering from that. But to justify why you would use your office or your responsibility or the power you have at whatever level to solve your problems, which you actually all have in the country, I would not accept it. But there are people who want to escape that by turning it into politics. You say, I'm being hunted for this, but it is not that, you know, but you know. And they don't even talk about their own involvement. They talk about, they turn it into politics. So that's what my critics mainly do, hiding behind this. You know, I mean, it's something. It's fashionable to talk about democracy, freedom, and even those who don't respect them hide behind the quest for that, and cover up their crimes by saying, you know, I was being questioned, but really for nothing. It's just because there is a bad government. They will not tell you that they are being followed for having stolen money in Ministry of Education that was supposed to go and educate kids, or Ministry of Health that was supposed to build the systems to keep our people healthy, and so on and so forth. This is the situation you have. Otherwise, and again, even for people widely who want to understand our problem, really, these people, you can count them, by the way, on your the fingers of your hands. How do they turn into the majority? When the majority of the citizens, for them, they appreciate what they have and what they are doing, but a few individuals escape that and turn it into a problem by which the country has to be judged honestly, and you forget the feelings and the judgment of the majority of our people. This is what is at issue. This is what we have to deal with. So, with what I have said, therefore, those critics, by the way, I hear them, I know them, and this is why I can explain it to you, because, and in fact, there are those who have gone like that, escaped the country, and then they are back now. They apologize. They say, you know, in fact, they confirm these things I'm talking about, how they, in the end, go out there and start talking ill of their own country or their government or their leaders. Many times we see they write back and say, no, I think I did wrong, I'm coming back, and we allow them back. They are here.